Hi, my name's Hannah and welcome to this beginners series. In this video, we're going to be breaking down some more of the standing poses that you would see used quite a lot, quite frequently in yoga practices. For this video, you might need some blocks. I would have them to hand just in case. And you'll also need some space to move, but other than that, we'll get started. So in this video, we're breaking down standing poses. Generally, the yoga practices that we see in the West are quite strong and dynamic practices. They tend to be more based around the physical poses themselves. So often hatha and vinyasa styles are the styles that we see more generally in the West. There are some gentler styles that we see cropping up and becoming more popular as well, but for the most part, it is the more dynamic and strong classes. In those sorts of classes, we tend to build from kind of gentle poses that open and warm the body all the way up into sun cells, and then standing poses. So that's what we're going to break down today. A lot of these poses are used quite frequently in classes, so you'll see at least one of these in every class, if not more. But we're going to start with a lunge today. So if we come to the mat, we're going to step the right foot forward and our left foot back. And we want quite a wide distance between the legs. A lunge is a pose that isn't just used in yoga, it's used in other forms of movement as well. So this could be quite familiar to lots of us. But yeah, so similar to Warrior One actually. So we're going to keep those right toes pointing forward. The difference here is we're going to lift the back heel away from the mat. So on the ball of that back foot, both hips are square. So we're going to pull our left hip forward and our right hip back. Quite often in lunges, you'll have the right foot directly in front of the left foot. This does make it really difficult to balance. It's called our tightrope stance. And what would actually probably work better here is a train track stance. So we're taking the right foot a little further out to the right, the left foot a little further out to the left. And that's going to help you to balance in this pose. I've got quite a nice deep bend in my front leg. The aim is for that front thigh to be parallel with the ground, but that's just where we're working towards. It's not necessary. We're going to squeeze the navel in. What I often see in lunges is people flaring their ribs, and that creates a lot of pressure in the lower part of the spine. It can cause a little bit of injury and discomfort there. So what we're going to do instead is knit the ribs together, tuck the tailbone under, and then think about reaching the arms up to the sky. Lovely. And this is our high lunge. Hands can be at heart center here. We can bring the hands onto the hips if that's more comfortable. We can also drop the back knee down to the mat. This is a variation of lunge. It still works on strengthening as long as we're squeezing the inner thighs towards each other, but it takes away some of the load. So that is an option as well. I'm going to think about grounding down through that big toe. We keep the gaze out in front of us in this pose. Again, arms up above, heart center, on the hips, wherever feels best for you. Lovely. Let's take that on the opposite side. So swapping the legs over, left foot forward, our right foot steps back this time. So we're sinking low into that front leg. Again, we're pulling our right hip forward this time. Squeeze the navel in, tuck the tailbone under, reach the arms high. And for all of these poses, you'll notice every time you practice, it feels a little bit different. So you might find that in some practices, you feel really strong and you can stay in this pose for a long time. In other ones, you might have to drop the back knee. It really depends on how you're feeling, both physically and emotionally. So just be aware of that it doesn't have to look the same every time you step on the mat. Progress is never linear. Good. Okay, when you're ready, let's step forward and out of the pose. So the next one that we're going to come into is called chair pose. And quite self-explanatory really. It's as if we were going to sit back into a chair. So what we're going to do is bring the feet about hip width apart. You can bring the big toes together. I personally like to keep them hip width. We're going to ground down through the feet. I'm going to start to bend my knees. I'm going to send the weight backwards, so I'm sending the sit bones backwards into the heels of the feet. And you can sink as low as feels good for you in this. We're also going to sweep the arms up to the sky, and this is essentially the pose. So in this shape, we're sending the weight backwards into the heels of the feet. We should be able to lift our toes away from the mat. They don't have to stay lifted, but by lifting them away, we know that the weight is in the right place here. Squeeze the navel in. A lot of us will stick the tailbone out here, but we want to try and tuck that under just slightly so that we're creating length through the spine. So we don't want it to be tucked under to the point that we're rounding. We just want to create length. The arms are overhead, but if it's more comfortable, we can bring the hands to heart center or even place the hands on the hip. That really goes for a lot of these poses. The hands don't have to be raised. They can kind of go wherever feels best. I like to think about my inner thighs in this pose as well. So you almost want to imagine, and you could take a yoga brick if you wanted to. So either placing a brick in between the knees or imagining that there's a yoga brick there and we're squeezing onto that brick. And that's going to engage the inner thighs a little bit more as well. Nice. Allow the shoulders to drop away from the ears. And then lengthen the legs and we'll come all the way back out. Perfect, nice. So another quite strong, strengthening pose. Chair pose. Okay, we're going to come into a pyramid pose next. So for this one, we'll step our right foot forward. We're going to step our left foot back. Not quite as wide as we would for a lunge. This one works on hamstrings. So if you feel like you've got quite tight hamstrings, then I would grab your blocks and I just pop them either side of that right foot. So my left foot is stepped back. It's about half a leg away from my front foot. Again, it can vary from person to person depending on how it feels. My left heel is down on the earth. So those toes are slightly turned out here. And we want the heel in line with the other heel. So front heel in line with back heel. We're going to keep the legs lengthened, although there can be a soft bend in the knee if that feels more comfortable as well. And we'll take an inhale first of all, just to find some length through the spine. It is a forward fold, and with any forward fold, we want to make sure that we're folding from the hips rather than rounding and folding from the waist. So keeping that chest lifted, sending the bottom backwards as we fold forward over that front leg. Like I said, the hands can come onto blocks here. That's always an option. You can place the hands onto the shins if you prefer, or if you've got quite a lot of hamstring flexibility, we can plant the hands down to the mat. Think about pulling your left hip forward and your right hip back, again, just to keep the hips nice and square. Soften through the shoulders and just enjoy the stretch. Think about pressing down through that right big toe. Again, we're trying to keep the spine as lengthened as possible. When we say lengthened in yoga, we don't mean the spine needs to be straight. There's always natural curves in the spine. It would be impossible to straighten it out completely. We're just trying to create length with what we have. Nice. It's quite a nice pose for creating a little bit of flexibility and length in the hamstrings. Lovely. Okay, stepping the left foot forward to meet the right foot. Let's swap it over. So your right foot steps back just a little bit. Again, setting up the foundations first. Grab your blocks if you need to. I always find there is always going to be slight imbalances in the body. So one side will be your dominant side, which is my right leg. So a little bit stronger, a little bit more flexible, a little bit better for balancing. And I always find in poses like this one, it's really obvious that my left leg is not quite as flexible as the other. I really feel it on this side. So I'm going to grab my blocks for this one. I'm going to pop them either side of my left foot. Lovely, set that up. Take an inhale, find a little bit of length through the spine, and then again, sending the bottom backwards is where I send my chest down towards my left leg. I'm going to place the hands onto the blocks, feeling the stretch in that left hamstring. Lovely. Perfect, well done. Okay, let's step our right foot forward to meet our left foot. We'll come back to the top of the mat. Okay. Got a few more poses to work through today. This isn't all of the poses, of course. It's just some of the most used ones. So the next one that we're going to come into is called triangle pose. And for this one, we'll start with our right leg. So right foot is going to come. I'm going to swap sides over just so that I'm visible. But the right foot's going to stay forward. We're going to take our left foot back. A lot of the time you'll see that we'll come from warrior 2 into triangle. So we've got almost like a warrior 2 stance. You can shorten your stance for this slightly if you want to. You can keep it nice and long like you would in warrior 2 if that feels better. It's totally up to you. Some teachers do cue to shorten the stance here, but I find that it works different for different people. So up to you. Same as warrior 2, we're going to ground down through the outer edge of the back foot. Bring the arms out to shoulder height like you would in warrior 2, but keep your right leg lengthened. Let's turn the palms to face forward. And then as we inhale, we'll shift forward as we send the hips backwards. We're going to bring our right hand down to our right inner leg, and we'll take our left arm up to the sky. And this one is triangle pose. This one is less about reaching the floor and less about the stretch that we get in the legs, and it's actually more about the side body. So if you find that by taking the hand down towards the mat, your top shoulder drops down as well, think about lifting back up slightly and open the shoulder instead. Another option, we can grab our block, place it next to that right ankle, and pop the right hand on top if that feels good. It definitely feels good to me. You might find in this one that if you're doing the alignment correctly and you're focusing on opening the chest, sending the hips back, that you actually do start to feel it in the leg as well anyway. So yeah. Gaze can be up towards that top hand. You can keep it out in front of you if that's more comfortable, whatever feels best for you. Lovely. Let's swap it over. So left foot points to the top of the mat now. Right toes are going to turn in slightly. I'm going to place my block down because that was quite comfortable. Keep that left leg lengthened. Ground down through the outer edge of the back foot, arms to shoulder height. Turn the palms forward. Inhale, we're going to shift forward as we send the hips backwards. Exhale, left hand to your left inner leg. Right arm reaches up this time. I'm going to put my hand onto that block. Nice. So kind of like a side bend. We're creating length in the side body. We want to reach out through those right fingertips. Just breathing, as always. Lovely. And then when you're ready, we'll come all the way back out. Let's keep the feet as they are. The next one that we're going to come into is called goddess pose. So we're going to keep the feet nice and wide. We're actually going to start to turn the toes out and the heels in. Yeah, and we're going to come into another sort of squat position. Reminds me of kind of ballet and the shapes that you would create in ballet. So the toes are pointed out, heels are pointed in. We're going to start to bend the knees and sink the hips low. This is another hip opening pose. So we want to make sure that we're sending the knees outwards to open up into the hips. And as we do this, we're tucking the tailbone under. We're going to keep the length through the spine, so lifting up out through the crown of the head, squeezing the navel in. In this one, there's lots of variations of the arms. It's really good for strengthening the legs. I already started to feel that, but there's lots of variations that we can take with the arms, as with most of these poses. The most common one that we see is with the arms in a cactus shape, so almost mirroring the legs with the arms. So we're bringing the elbows to shoulder height, bending them. The arms reach up towards the sky. We spread the fingers nice and wide. Lovely. And after a few breaths, you really start to feel the legs fire up. That one's goddess pose. The final one that we're going to finish with today is a wide-legged forward fold. So we're going to keep the legs as they are. Rather than the toes pointing out, we're going to turn the toes to face the long edge of the mat instead. Some teachers will tell you to turn the toes in. I find that really uncomfortable on my ankles personally, so I like to keep them facing the long edge, but again, totally up to you. Legs are going to stay lengthened. It's another fold, so we want to make sure that we're folding forward from the hips. So find a little bit of length through the spine, lift the chest. We're going to take the hands to the hips for this one as well. We're going to start to hinge forward, lowering the chest down towards the ground. Keep the length in the spine, and then when it feels good, we can reach the hands down towards the mat. If they don't quite meet the mat, as always, place blocks underneath. In this one, again, there's lots of arm variations. So sometimes we'll keep the hands directly underneath us. You can take the hands to the ankles if that feels more comfortable. We can walk the hands through the legs instead, whatever works for you. What I do want you to think about is where the weight is in your feet in this pose. Quite often we hold the weight in the heels of our feet, but for this pose, we want to evenly spread across the foot. So see if it makes a difference by shifting the weight forward just slightly so that there's some of the weight in the toes as well as the heels. I always find when I do that, that the hamstring stretch that I'm feeling travels a little further up my hamstrings towards my glutes as well as the rest of the area. Lovely. So just holding this pose for a little bit longer, feeling the full effect of the shape. And then when you're ready, we'll soften through the knees, start to slowly roll up through the spine, and then we'll step forward back to the top of the mat. Fabulous, well done. Okay, so those are some of the kind of most used poses that we find in our more dynamic styles of yoga. Thank you for joining me today. Namaste.